this is Off Script, the podcast about everything tech and related to tech and non-related to tech. And today we're talking about burnout, and we've got Fabiola, our amazing guest today. So there is this idea or a preconception that some people are more prone to burning out, like overachievers or perfectionists. I don't know if that's actually true.
So there's 3 elements in burnout, and one of them is the work environment. If the work environment is completely healthy, then no matter the person, there's not going to be a burnout. Okay. However, thing is that when we're hiring someone to work in a company, we want someone who is going to be committed, who is going to want to do a good job, who is going to be fully involved in their work, and who is going to be a team player, who is going to want to take care of the team and do their job well. And so we're actually hiring someone who can burn out. And we don't want someone who's going to be like, well, actually, I don't really care about my job. I'm gonna do, if I do it and it's not up to the standard that you want, it doesn't really matter to me. And I'm gonna half-ass everything you ask me to do. That person is not gonna last past the first few months of, is this person a good fit? That person would definitely never burn out. But that's not who we hire. So then people are like, oh, but I need to be careful who I hire. No, you can't. Because you're not going to hire the person who will never burn out.
And going back to what you mentioned earlier about younger generation having a little bit of a different attitude towards work, and I noticed that some of the, well, maybe representatives of the boomer generation, they think that Gen Z are like lazy, or they have like this approach to work where they just show up, they do their work, and they don't really, so they think that they don't really care that much. And I agree with you. I don't think that's necessarily true. They just have better boundaries towards this is my work, this is my personal life. Is there like a difference in generations?
Definitely. A lot of the people that I work with, when we talk about their social environment, their parents, their family, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents even, oftentimes they tell me my parents, at least one of the two, worked all the time and worked until very late. I barely saw my father, I barely saw my mother, and we would only see them during the weekends, and during the weekends sometimes they worked as well, or they were traveling for work all the time, so we have that example of the past generation or generations even, where somebody would enter and be kind of at the bottom of the ladder, and then they would climb the ladder, and at some point it was every time we climb the ladder, there's a little bit more pressure, and longer hours and longer hours. And so we've seen that, and some generations kind of thought that's the way it is and modeled that. But then we also have COVID that came in between, and that started changing things quite a bit. Now a lot of people work remotely. A lot of people decided that actually work-life balance was super necessary, and there's a lot of people who burned out during COVID, and a lot of people who also didn't have any more work during COVID. So the relationship to work has changed drastically, and a lot of the kids who were kids at the time when COVID happened, they were like, hold on, what is going on? What am I noticing in my parents, in my family, and what is their relationship to work, and is that what I want? And people started talking a lot more about mental health, and even the government at some point was like, okay, people have the right to disconnect, and things like that. And so it became more of an issue because also at the moment there's about like more than half of the employees who, when asked, say that they at least have burnt out in the past or are feeling like they are burning out at the moment, which is huge. And it's not okay. It's not normal. And the new generation, they are aware that no job is worth their mental health. And I think that's really healthy.
It is healthy.
It's good news. It's good news. So yeah, I think they're kind of like the hope of the past generations, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, the current generation, the younger generation, are a lot more aware of mental health in general, and they have a lot more vocabulary to speak about this. So yeah, this is great. And I do know that you have your career built around burnout and maybe educating people or companies about it. So, did you find out something later on that you wish you knew before you started it?
I think there's one thing that I wish I knew, which was that if you work with people who have a manager who's burning out, the work that you can do is very limited. So I think I knew, I think I wish I knew to target managers from the beginning, and because they're the ones I need to coach. Because if when I coach a manager, not only do I work on that person's burnout and either prevention of burnout, but most of the time actual burnout. But I also help them figure out who in their team is burning out, who do they give, who is their star in their team, you know, and who do they tend to give the extra project to, and the person who's always there, who's always ready, who's always on top of things. That's gonna be the person who everybody's like, that employee is amazing. Yes, but that employee is also probably very much burned out. I've done that with one person who was like, oh my God. Like at first, when I was like, okay, who in your team is burning out? She's like, no, I think we're good. Like everything is okay. Everybody's happy. And I was like, okay, who is your, let me rephrase this. Who is your star in your, this person's amazing, they travel all the time for work and they do so much and it's great. I was like, okay, that person is burning out. What? Yeah. And then we started talking a little bit about that, and she was like, oh my God, you're right. And I was like, yes. So let's look into the conversations you can have around how to protect your mental health, and what are we going to change so that no one burns out. And I'm working at the moment with a manager who told me, like, now I've taught my team to say no. I've taught my team to like at 5 p.m. I kick my team out of the building, and like different ways that she's teaching her team to protect their mental health. Because the thing that we tend to forget is that the company is actually legally responsible for the mental health of their employees. And a lot of companies are like, whatever, if you're burning out, it's your problem. But legally, that's not true.
What does burnout actually look like? And I know this word has been thrown around a lot, and there is a bit of confusion about what it is and what does it look like, and why do so many people not recognize it in themselves until it's too late? So could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so it's been extremely confusing because people actually talk about phase 5 and 6 of burnout more than any other phases. And so, and people misunderstand what burnout is. So burnout is actually a set of symptoms, and that's where it gets really confusing because everybody can, like, burnout can look different in different people. And so we can talk about the different phases. I think it's very important to understand the different phases. In reality, there's three factors. There's the work environment that, in my experience, is never 100% healthy. Sometimes people come to me and they're like, but my boss is great. But when we start scratching the surface and going deeper, yes, they're supportive, but maybe they're also manipulative, or like there's something that is going to be actually unhealthy that we're going to uncover. So there is always that. Also, there's the environment, the social environment of the person. And that is something we never talk about. Where did I grow up? What are the things that I saw growing up? Did my parents burn out? Were my parents working all the time or doing everything around the apartment or whatever? And my teachers and in how I was raised in general, my grandparents, all that. And also, because of that social environment that I grew up in, I actually developed a bunch of different techniques to handle survival. And so, depending on how I handle my stress and time management and perfectionism and all those things that I've put into place in childhood, I need to also work on those things. So there's all those three factors. And oftentimes, so what we do in burnout coaching, in burnout recovery coaching, is that we help the person figure out what is it that they need to readjust in their behaviors so that they change their relationship to themselves. And when that has changed, that has also changed the relationship to their environment, their social environment. So oftentimes they don't have the same friends at the end and at the beginning. And also they change their relationship to work. And what does work mean for me? Is how important is work in my life. And so they don't accept the same kind of jobs. And they create a sort of radar for what is going to be a burnout environment. And once that has changed, everything changes. And the life of that person changes because they put burnout behind permanently. And most of the time, they're not going to go back to the same company. Sometimes they even change jobs altogether. And it's at least they don't go back to the same team. The heart of burnout is stress. But once we've said that, stress can come from a lot of places. And as we've seen, like stress can come from work, but it can come from my social environment. It can be like inner pressure that I put on myself to try to be perfect and whatnot. And there's different phases that represent basically the body going into survival mode. And depending on for how long it's been in survival mode, people can be in phase 5 for a very long time. So there's different phases, and here I'm talking about work from Christina Maslach, who is a psychologist, an American psychologist, who studied burnout extensively. And she represents it in different phases, but people can enter, like, they don't necessarily hit all 5 stages in a sort of like chronological order. Some do all the phases. For some, it's chronological. For some, there's some phases that they skip. But basically, phase 1 is going to be people are very invested in their job. If we talk about work-related burnout, but basically there's a lot of stress that comes from work, and there's not enough recovery. Phase 1 is very obvious because we know when we're working too much. But in the world that we live in, it's been normalized. So, oh yeah, work is pretty intense at the moment. Oh yeah, I'm working late tonight. And we don't realize that tonight is not just tonight, but it's been going on for a while. And so people ignore phase 1. Phase 1 is normal. And then they go into sometimes phase 2. Phase 2 is I am so exhausted. I start resenting work. and I don't feel motivated anymore. When I burnt out, I didn't go through phase 2. And a lot of my clients have not been through phase 2. Phase 2 is also when we are going to work and we just don't want to go there. And it leaks into phase 3, which is an emotional phase where we start developing cynicism sometimes, or we start being irritable. We're under a lot of pressure, so like, I'm under a lot of pressure, so I snapped, I'm sorry. That's going to be what people say, and again, it's going to be normalized. It's going to be like, oh yeah, they're under a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress at work, that's why they're like little tens at the moment. That's phase 3 of burnout. And people don't name it, and that's really a problem. Because then people don't say, hold on, I'm noticing this. This is actually not okay, and you need to go see someone. So it's ignored, it's normalized, and then we go into phase 4. Phase 4 is a cognitive phase where the brain cannot handle survival mode too long. The nervous system is just like on high alert all the time. And there's a moment where the neurons basically can't connect as well as they used to be. And so we are reading the same sentence several times. Like the other day, I talked to a client and she was like, yeah, like I went to reconnect after dinner, and just trying to do this one action that usually takes 30 seconds, I realized that after 5 minutes, I still wasn't able to do it. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe I'm a little too tired. I need to go to bed and I can't reconnect tonight. And oftentimes, all the phases kind of get combined, and people come and see me when they're at phase 5. Phase 5 is a physiological phase where we start having the body screaming. The body has been on high alert on cortisol, which is the stress hormone, for way too long. And it's like, okay, let's see what we can do in order to say that something is wrong. So for me, it was back pain. It was, I blocked my shoulder, and a lot of teachers, they have, like, because they're writing with like a specific arm, they tend to have shoulder problems. But there's also some people for which it's like more of a digestive issue, or hypertension, or hypotension, different ways that the body finds to say something's wrong. There's also some people who start having the sniffles and they can't get rid of that. And so it lasts for like a month, 2 months, and they're always like constantly sick. But it's not sick enough to go to the hospital or to actually be on sick leave. And so they just keep sort of powering through. And a lot of doctors, they don't actually recognize that. And they just label it as stress, and like, oh yeah, maybe they're gonna say, some are gonna say like, you need to go see someone, see a therapist is usually what they mean, but they don't actually tell people, like, there's some people who specialize in burnout. So what I did is that I went to see a therapist, and that person was not specialized in burnout. So, but I started feeling better, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna be fine now. But feeling better doesn't mean that we've healed, and so a lot of the time, people, that's what they do. They start feeling better, and they're like, okay, burnout is behind me. It was probably because of my job. I changed jobs, or I changed company, and now I'm fine. Or I become an entrepreneur, and now I'm fine. And actually, they haven't done the work to stop burning out, to change all the behaviors that they need to readjust. And so they go back into phase 5 so fast they don't even understand. And phase 5 is dangerous because you have also insomnia that can come in, and that can lead to just like a very long tunnel where people are exhausted but they can't sleep. And so they get into more and more exhaustion. And also, they have like, it's called the Sunday evening dread. So it's Sunday evening, they know they're going back to work on Monday, and they have that anxiety. They have that lump in their stomach maybe, or they have that tightness in their throat, you know? And that again is like, oh yeah, it's Sunday evening, it's work, it's being an adult, it's, you know, all those things. And so they normalize it. The other thing about phase 5 is that some people in that phase, because it's so painful, because it starts being really a problem, they try to numb those feelings. And so they might start smoking, they might start taking drugs, they might start drinking too much, and so it can lead to addictions, which then becomes a much bigger problem. And also when we're in phase 5, if we take the metaphor of, you know, the last straw that broke the camel's back, basically there's a ton of straw on the camel's back at that point, and it's just gonna take a circumstantial last straw that we do not control, and we're gonna break into phase 6. Phase 6 is the one that everybody wants to avoid because it's depression. And once we're in depression from burnout, we're in it for the long run. On average, it takes 18 months to recover from phase 6.
Oh, that's huge.
That's horrible, because the person is then on sick leave for a very long time. And then there's like, being on sick leave for so long, it can lead to ultimately feeling like maybe I can't go back to work. And a loss of self-confidence, a loss of trust in the world, in the beauty of life, in their capability as a worker, and it's very brutal.
I'm starting to think that I have a bit of all of the symptoms that you just named, so I'm gonna turn everything off and go and sleep. Oh my god, I didn't realize that it has so many dimensions.
Okay, so we all know about toxic managers, right? And those are pretty obvious. But what is less obvious is the very kind manager. There's a lot of really kind-hearted managers who really care about their team. They love their team. They want to take care of their team. And those managers, for sometimes they do actually a lot of damage because of the example that they set. So the really nice manager who connects again after dinner and works until 2 in the morning, that manager is giving actually a job to their team to do the same. And even though they might say with their words, don't do that, their action says, this is what I do. And the team understands, if I like my manager, which I do, then I am going to try to be very nice to my manager and do a great job. And because they connect until 2 in the morning, maybe it's okay if I do too. And so they're going to burn out, and the manager's going to be like, wait, what? But I don't understand. I actually recognize people's efforts, because some people think like, okay, burnout is a lack of recognition. It's so complicated. I have a questionnaire of more than 30 questions to understand the person's recipe for disaster. But basically then we can readjust all those things, and then the person is done with burnout forever. But that's also the problem, because people misunderstand burnout. And so they think, if I'm nice to my team is not going to burn out. But they don't recognize what is it that they do and also what is it that the company does. Because if there's a lot of changes in the company, like for like 2 months the company is going to be structured in one way, and then you know what, actually never mind, we're going to change teams and we're going to redo everything, or like we're going to change the process and whatnot, that can also be a huge stress depending on the person. There's some people who are going to be like, I love change. But a lot of people are going to be scared of change and be uncomfortable with change. And so they're going to be stressed by that. And depending on how it's handled, and if it's a very, top down kind of company, or if people can actually really talk to each other, there's different ways of having an unhealthy environment, basically. So each company is going to look different. I volunteer for this one organization that helps people who are unemployed go back to the workplace, and a lot of them have actually been through burnout, and that's why they're unemployed. And sometimes they have been unemployed for a really long time. Why? Because of phase 6, because it takes 18 months. And so that's a huge problem. That's really, really big. And a lot of people, when they end up in that position, they start losing their salary, like their salary is not paid in full for that long. And so they start entering a new kind of stress, which is financial stress. And when you add, like, you're trying to recover from stress and you add financial stress to your situation where you can't get the help you need because you would have to pay for a coach, a therapist, whatnot, and you don't have the money anymore, then it's just a vicious cycle. And so companies need to really get their act together and handle it at the root. And a lot of them, they're trying a lot of different ways, but they're not actually handling it properly.
All right, so the picture is becoming a bit dark. Do you think companies are becoming better at how they deal with burnout? And do you think it's getting a bit better now, or is it getting worse? And then secondly, if you could change one thing about how the companies deal with burnout or just general well-being of the employees, what would it be?
Okay. I don't know if it's getting better, if it's getting worse. I think there's some people who talk more about burnout than they used to be, and that's good. I think there's a bunch of companies that try to have like conferences or webinars or things like that around burnout to raise awareness. That's good. But I think a lot of companies, they do it wrong, in the sense that they're going to have they're not going to talk about the different phases of burnout, because I've been to some of those conferences. I know how they work. And a lot of the time they're not clear enough for people to understand how you can sink into burnout. So it's not crystal clear. So people leave and they're a little bit confused, and they're not better equipped to recognize it and actually handle it. And a lot of companies, what they try to do is they offer maybe a yoga class to their employees, or they offer a team building.
A massage. We used to have
A
like a back
massage.
massage, which is like 15 minutes of something that is supposed to like cure you of any work stress that you have.
Exactly. So what they do, the image would be they're trying to like add water to mud to make it a little bit less brown, but they don't handle the actual mud part. And they might actually like have, an app where you can do breathing, or they can have an app where you can learn to do some exercises like chair yoga or whatever to take a break. But a lot of the times, what none of their employees and none of their managers have done, or not enough, is how do I handle conflict? How can I be proactive when there is tension in my team, how do I handle emotions? How do I handle stress? How do we handle the workload? What conversations are we having around workload? When I ask my team to work on this one project, do I micromanage my team? Do I trust my team? What is the amount of hours that it actually represents to work on that project? If I assume that we can finish within 2 weeks, is that realistic? Or is that asking my team to work until 10 p.m. every night? A lot of the time, one test is really interesting when I talk to managers. It's like, okay, let me talk to you about the Pomodoro. Most of the time, they've never heard of the Pomodoro, which already is a red flag for me. It's like, ooh, there's something going wrong in your company. And when I explain to them, it's like, okay, you work for 25 minutes, like full focus, and then you take a break, and then full focus, and then take a break. They're like, first, I can't do that. I'm like, okay, maximum an hour and a half, and then you take a break, because that's what your brain needs. And the test is, do you think you can do that? And do you think your entire team can do that? Are you comfortable with that? Which means, are you comfortable with respecting the way your brain works? If the answer is, that's impossible, it seems like too much, we can't take breaks, we can't take 20, are you serious, Fabiola? A 20-minute break every hour and a half? What? That's when you know they're burning out. Someone is burning out.
Flag.
It's a huge red flag. But most companies, they're like, okay, maybe a 5-minute break, I'm gonna go pee. After an hour and a half, I'm gonna go pee. And I'm like, but that's not you respecting your brain. So there's gonna be a point in the afternoon where your brain is gonna start being like, and you're gonna have brain fog. And they're like, oh yeah, definitely. I'm like, that's called burnout. That's phase 4.
But is there a good way for companies to do that?
Okay. The one way that I can imagine would work is to actually do individual coaching of every single one of their managers for burnout prevention. Individual coaching, not just group coaching where people come and hang out and they're talking about like potentially what is burnout and whatnot. Individual coaching to see, because it's still such a taboo that most people taking the questionnaire around burnout, they would freak out. But making that mandatory and being like, this is going to be completely confidential, so no one is going to know what's going to happen. No one ever knows what I do with I never tell anyone. I just talk to the manager. My duty is to the manager that I work with, is not to the company. But just talking to the manager, doing the 30 plus questions, and then working on their burnout, because most of them are burning out at some level, and then working on how to protect their team, that can lead to actually companies being healthy. But for that, we need to also have companies where if I tell them this person is not coachable, or whatever coach tells them this person is not coachable, this person is not being a good manager, it would require the company to be like, okay, we need to figure out a solution, and maybe this person needs to find another employment. And a lot of companies, they're scared of doing that. They're very, very scared. So it would take a company with a lot of courage and probably a CEO who's burned out before, or who has had like some family members who burned out, or maybe something extremely tragic happening because of burnout, for them to be like, oh hell no, it cannot happen in my company. I would be curious to see the list of all the places that are on the list of good place to work and work with those companies and see exactly how good of a place it is for the people there.
Yeah, definitely. And the good thing is that thanks to social media now, people can actually kind of expose their company even in a way where you can't find out who exactly said that. So there is Glassdoor, there are accounts on Instagram, I think, where they kind of talk shit about companies, and I think it's great. I think it's great, but I don't know if
But see, that's also very revealing. If you
yeah.
have to be anonymous to talk about your company, it means what is HR doing? What is the union doing? Like how bad does the environment need to be? How toxic does it need to be for you to not feel like you can trust anyone in your company with the fact that you're burning out or other people in your team are burning out? Like, that's just so very telling.
I know, but sometimes there is just this circumstance of like you just want to vent and you want to do it openly and you just don't want to sign your name there. Like I think it's good that you're able to do that.
I think it's very necessary, but I think it's also very scary to think like if I was the CEO of a company and I saw my name in one of those places, I would freak out because I would think, okay, it's like there's a lot of things that must be going wrong in my company for somebody A to say that they're burning out and that something wrong is happening, and B to feel like they can only do it anonymously.
I would be freaking out as well. But you know, like most of the time, like people who found companies, they're kind of like so business driven and number driven that they don't have like empathic qualities. I don't want to say developed, but they're kind of less keen on developing empathy and kind of like emotional intelligence as opposed to like business achievement, etc. So they're overachievers in this sense. So I guess I've seen so many complaints about like CEOs being like timing the toilet breaks or like saying hello in a weird way, and um, all of those reviews on social media. They're kind of like I think those people who those reviews are about, they wouldn't take it in a like they would be like, yeah, I do that, like so what, I at least my company is like bringing a lot of money, so I don't know
But
how to.
that's where they get it wrong. Because short term, yes, they will make a lot of money. But long term, they're going to start having to replace people so often that they're going to be losing so much money. And then they're going to end up at the tribunal over and over and over again, having case after case after case. And not only would they lose the talents, and so talent acquisition is going to be a problem, and it's such a huge financial drain when you have to replace someone, when you have to pay someone who's on sick leave, then replace that person, onboard the new person. People say that it takes about a year for a new person to really fully understand their job and settle in their position. If after a year or two of being in that company that person burns out, imagine the cash drain. And that's the thing. If somebody is only focused on numbers, there's a point where those numbers are going to show you need to take care of your employees. Otherwise, you're wasting a ton of money. And that's where they can actually start taking action, not because they might feel very warm and fuzzy about about taking care of their employees, but because the numbers will keep them up at night. You gotta take care of your human resources. You gotta take care of the people because that's the only way also for them to be productive. One of the things is that in phase two, a lot of people stop being productive because they're so drained. And that's just phase two. So imagine in phase 5 when you're fully like you're in pain and you can't think properly and whatnot, your productivity is down the toilet.
That's actually a great argument for anyone.
There's a few things that companies tell me to try to justify burnout, to try to justify the workload. One of the things, and also like companies, but also employees, is, but I knew what I was signing up for. They knew what they were signing up for. We pay them really well, so that justifies everything. If you look at also the media, sometimes you see articles about somebody who's like getting a very big salary, and it says in the article, like, yes, I am making a lot of money. I am making 10K a month or whatever, but I work 75 hours a week, or I work 100 hours a week. And no one says, by the way, this person is burning out. You know, like people don't name it. Anyway, so that's one thing. Another thing is, oh, but they pay for vacation. So like once a year we go on this amazing vacation, and it's like the company pays for it and it's great and it's nothing I could ever afford, and so it's worth it. And there's a lot of things like around it's worth the sacrifices that I'm making with my mental health. Burnout is a trauma because the brain knows that if you continue, the worst case scenario is not depression. The worst case scenario is death. So death by suicide or death by heart attack or whatever way. You name it, it can happen. And people don't remember that. They're like, oh, I'm just stressed. But it can get really bad. Oftentimes, the heart of stress is you're trying to control, you want to control the uncontrollable. And we have a choice between trust or fear. And oftentimes, if we're in survival mode, we're going to choose fear. We're not even going to be aware that trust is a possibility, is an option. But we live in an environment where from the very beginning, in school, and I saw that with my daughter, in school, they're 2.5, 3 years old when they start. And they start hearing, don't cry, you're not a baby. And so sadness is not an option. So they try to block sadness. And they're not really allowed to scream in school, which, of course, it makes sense, except a lot of kids, then they try to also repress anger because they feel like they can't express it, they're not allowed to, instead of having people teaching them how to navigate those emotions and allow those emotions to come and be expressed in a respectful way where, of course, we're not going to let a child like destroy everything because they're angry, you know? But we can teach them how to handle anger in a good way. And so also they're told don't be too loud. So joy is also going to be something that they're going to have to repress. If they start laughing because something good happened, something funny happened, oftentimes the teacher is not going to start laughing with them, and they're not going to let laughter spread. So joy is also something that they're going to try to repress. And so all you're left with is fear. And that's the only emotion that they're allowed to experience. And that is going to be used again and again and again in the school system. As adults, it leads to this huge amount of anxiety that is the perfect way for burnout to happen. Burnout is like you have this huge amount of gas and you just lit a match and then you're like, I don't understand what happened. So it's really important to teach our children to handle their emotions, to let their emotions not just like come and stay in them and lock them down, but actually to experience them and let them go. And that's one of the things that we do in Burnout is in Burnout coaching is we get like, I teach my clients to handle emotions, and most of the time when they start doing that, they're like, oh my god, but I have so much sadness, so much anger, so much stuck in my body, and it's been there for so long. And I'm like, I know. And that's so important. So it can start really early on. We can start to actually create all the behaviors that are going to keep us alive, okay, and help us survive as children. But then if we don't put those into questions when we arrive and when we become adults, then they can really play against us and lead us to something that can be really, really a horrible experience. Startups need to understand that from the very beginning, the way that they're building it, they need to create fail-safes. They need to create safety nets everywhere so that they know there's not going to be any burnout. And they need to look at the actual numbers of hours that people are spending. And they need to start questioning the way that things work when they realize that at 9 p.m. everybody is having dinner together. What is happening? Is your company your family, your new family? No, it's not. And it's not healthy if it happens like regularly. If it happens every night, it's definitely unhealthy. It happens once a month. Okay, maybe, sure. But if it's regular, you're in trouble.
Because I guess in startups it's like this by design, right? Because it's usually like two or three people building something in their garage and then like to become multimillionaires at 28 and then retire. But they can't expect everyone else to do the same thing, right? So when they start scaling up, they need to kind of shift that attitude, I guess.
But they need to also, like, if they manage to shift it from the beginning and not be working 12 hours every day, and just like be reasonable. You have a great idea. Okay, that's wonderful. You want to change the world? Wonderful. Go for it. Do you have to burn yourself out in the process? I think if your answer is, yeah, I think that's fine, then you're in trouble. There's like this sort of superhero complex, like my brain, I just need 4 hours of sleep. No, you don't. You need 7 hours, and not just sleep, but also breaks. And so if people started to use the Pomodoro from day one, and started to be like, okay, I love that I have this great idea and there's just 2 or 3 people right now, and maybe becoming a multimillionaire by the age 28 is not the right goal. Maybe the goal should be, what can I achieve, all the while respecting the only body I have, the only brain I have, and still make the world a better place, or still do this one idea that I have,
But what is the best way if, for example, if you don't work for someone, but maybe you have a day job, but you have a side project on the side where you're like, I want to make this work in 1 year. I'm gonna put all of my effort into this. I need to be really smart about this because I have my sleeping hours. I've got my Pomodoro technique. So, and I'm doing this outside of work. A lot of people are doing something right now, right? So, is there like a smart way to do that, or do you still need to like think about long-term consequence on your body, etc.?
You always need to think about your body and listen. So the body, what we say is the body whispers before it screams. So planning recovery time. So maybe you decide that you want to work all day Saturday on your project every Saturday for this upcoming month or whatever. Listen and figure out little by little, is that a good rhythm for me? Maybe you think, okay, I finish my work at 6 and then I go home and I have dinner and I take a proper break. And then I have another hour in me or another 2 hours in me. Okay, after a week of doing that, think, okay, how is my body feeling? Is that too much? Or can I do more? And if I can do more because I'm full of energy, because whatever, then okay, I can do more. But the minute your body is like, hey, something is wrong, you gotta listen. The minute you start snapping at people, the minute you start being less patient than you used to be, the minute you start having this one pain here, this one digestive problem, this one heart issue, then you need to figure something out and do things differently. And a lot of the times we power through pain. And we've heard that over and over again in sports and whatnot. Like, oh yeah, this person, like, they got hurt, but they're, like we see that in soccer. This person who's like, oh, I'm in pain, and then like, oh yeah, but a little spray, and then they're good as right as rain, and they can power through it. And this person's such a hero because they can power through pain. We need to stop trying to power through pain. If we're in pain, we need to stop. It's the body being like, take care of me, please. And we don't have like multiple bodies that can just go through and be like, oh, this body doesn't work anymore. That's okay. I have a different one, And same for a brain. We can't just be like, oh yeah, I like, for example, if I know that I've experienced trauma in my childhood, I need to work on that trauma because that's keeping us in survival mode. And a lot of those emotions that date back from childhood, they're coming out to play every time I feel a little bit angry. It's like anger is going to open the door of the waiting room of emotions. It's going to be like, hey, I'm anger. Who wants to come with me? And all the angers from the past are going to come, and suddenly I'm overreacting to this tiny little thing. And I'm like, I don't understand why I did that. I guess I felt really angry. That's because you have unprocessed anger from your past. You need to work on it. And a lot of us are actually functioning from CPTSD, complex PTSD, because we've had repeated trauma in childhood and we have never actually dealt with it. We don't even know we have CPTSD until we start looking into it. And at some point I did, and I was like, and I talked to a therapist who I was doing EMDR with, and I was like, I think I have CPTSD. And she was like, oh yeah, you do. And I was like, but you never told me, you never named it. There's a lot that we need to do in order to ourselves be ready and able to recognize a place that is a burnout factory. That's what I call it. But also to recognize when we can easily burn out in an environment that's going to be a little bit unhealthy or very unhealthy. EMDR is still something that a lot of people have never heard of. And it's the one therapy that's been really created to handle trauma. And so a lot of people are still scared of going to therapy, scared of dealing with their trauma, and they would rather, try to go to sleep and bitch about not being able to sleep than actually go see a therapist and unearth everything that they've experienced in the past to kind of like, it's the metaphor is like dirty laundry. You have this room with dirty laundry in it. And EMDR, what it does is that it takes the clothes, puts it in the washing machine, and then like irons everything and folds everything and puts it in little drawers that are like memory. And we can function for a very long time with very dirty laundry. And every time we open the door, we're like, oof, it smells, and we close it. And burnout forces us, because we're so tired, we can't keep that door closed anymore because it takes so much energy to keep that door closed, because our subconscious wants us to handle that dirty laundry. So there's a point where we're too tired and we leave the door open and we try to go to sleep and we can't because it smells. so we need to do it. But some people say you go to therapy because you live with people who don't go to therapy. We're trying to just do everything on our own, and we're in this society where being individualistic and being a self-made man or a self-made woman is like, oh my god, that's amazing, that's such a hero, and we need to get out of that.
Great, that's a great conclusion for our conversation. I have a lot to think about this afternoon. Thank you so much, Fabiola. And I hope that burnout and the tools to deal with it get more awareness. It was really great to see you.